This is the story of a humble peasant who was humiliated in the worst way, and of a dying animal that God used to reveal who was truly in the heart of each person. The sun beat down mercilessly on the parched fields of the La Esperanza ranch. Don Elias took off his hat and wiped the sweat from his brow with his forearm. He had worked these lands for over 30 years, long before the young owner, Pedro, inherited everything from his father. He knew every inch of the land, every tree, every animal. That's why what was about to happen pained him so deeply. From the main stable, the weak moos of the great black one, as everyone called the stud bull who had been the pride of the ranch, reached their ears like laments. The animal had been lying prostrate for 3 days, barely eating. Weakened by an illness the veterinarian hadn't been able to diagnose clearly. "Elias!" Don Pedro's sharp voice interrupted his thoughts. "I've made my decision. We'll slaughter that animal first thing tomorrow. I'm not going to keep losing money on a bull that's no longer good for anything." Don Elias clutched his hat in his calloused hands. He had raised that bull since it was a calf. He had watched it grow, become the best stud bull in the region. For years, the great black bull had sired exceptional offspring that had made the ranch prosper. Patron, with all due respect, ventured to say that the animal simply needs time to recover. The veterinarian said it could improve with proper care. Pedro let out a dry laugh that echoed in the hot afternoon air. "Time? Time is money, man. And I'm not wasting another penny on a dying animal. We'll put it down tomorrow. Period." Don Elias's face darkened. He felt something break inside his chest, something deeper than mere affection for an animal. It was the certainty that his son did not possess the same nobility as his deceased father. "How much do you want for the bull, boss?" The words came out of his mouth almost without thinking. Pedro looked at him in surprise, and then a mocking smile spread across his face. "You? You want to buy the big black?" He laughed contemptuously. "With what money, old man? You can barely afford to support your family." Don Elias took a deep breath, trying to contain the humiliation he felt. "I have savings, boss. Not a lot, but I've put some aside over the years. Give me a fair price." Pedro narrowed his eyes, calculating. Then he named an amount that was equivalent to almost all of Don Elias's life savings. It was an absurd price for a dying animal, but an insignificant price compared to what the bull had been worth in his prime. "I accept," said Don Elias, his voice firm despite the trembling of his hands. The news spread like wildfire around the ranch. The other workers looked at Don Elias with a mixture of pity and concern. "The old man's lost his mind," they murmured. "He spent all his savings on an animal that won't last a week." That same afternoon, Don Elias transported Gran Negro to his small plot of land in a borrowed cart. The bull could barely stand, and his eyes, once bright and defiant, now seemed dull, veiled with pain. His wife, Doña Carmen, was waiting for him at the door of their modest house. Her face contorted when she saw the animal in that state. "Elias, what have you done?" she whispered, clutching her chest. "Did you spend our savings on that poor animal?" Don Elias nodded, unable to look her in the eyes. "I couldn't let him die like that, Carmen. Not after everything he's given. It wasn't fair." Doña Carmen sighed. She knew her husband well. She knew he had a heart of gold. It was that kindness that had made her fall in love decades ago, and it was that same kindness that now left them almost without resources for their old age. "God knows why you do these things," Elijah finally said, resignedly. "But now we must take care of that poor animal." During the following days, Don Elias dedicated every free minute to caring for Gran Negro. He built a small shelter to protect him from the sun and rain, prepared mixtures of medicinal herbs he had learned from his father, and spoke to him gently while brushing him, as if the animal could understand his words of encouragement. "You're going to recover, Negro," she whispered as she brushed against his dull fur. "You still have a long life ahead of you. We're not going to give them the satisfaction of seeing you die. And you? Have you ever felt that life repaid you with something you didn't deserve? If so, write the word faith in the comments to remember that God always sees what others don't value. Time passed, and the animal's condition didn't improve significantly. He ate a little more, it's true, but he remained weak, unable to stand for long periods. The townspeople began to talk. They said Don Elias had wasted his money, that the old man was going mad with age. Some even laughed openly at him when they saw him walk by. One Sunday, after Mass, Pedro approached Don Elias in the town square. He was accompanied by 2 landowning friends, and all 3 had mocking smiles on their faces. "How's your investment doing, old man?" he asked sarcastically. "Have you gotten your money back yet?" The other men laughed, and some people stopped to listen. "The animal is improving, boss," Don Elias replied with dignity. "Little by little, but it's improving." "Improving for the grave!" exclaimed Pedro, provoking more laughter. "Let's face it, old man, you made the worst deal of your life. But don't worry, when the animal dies, I'll buy the hide from you, out of pity." Don Elias felt his blood boil in his veins, but he pressed his lips together and didn't answer. His wife took his arm and led him away, while the laughter continued behind them. "Don't listen to them," Elijah said gently. "You know what you're doing, and God sees the goodness in your heart." That night, a terrible storm struck the region. Lightning lit up the sky, and the rain fell so heavily it seemed to threaten to sink the earth. Don Elias couldn't sleep, worried about the great black one. Several times he got up to check that the shelter was holding, that the animal was safe. When dawn broke, the sun shone brightly, as if the storm had never happened. Don Elias went out to assess the damage to his small property and headed first to the bull's shelter. What he saw left him speechless. The great black one was standing. Not only that, the animal had an upright, dignified, almost defiant posture. His eyes shone with a new light, and when he saw Don Elias approaching, he let out a powerful bellow, like the ones he used to have. "Carmen! Carmen, come see this!" shouted Don Elias, with tears running down his weathered face. The following days were like a continuous miracle. The big black was improving by leaps and bounds. He ate heartily, walked the grounds, and even began to show his former dominant temperament. His black coat regained its jet-black sheen, and his muscles were once again defined beneath his skin. Don Elias was beside himself with joy. He had been right. The animal only needed time and care. And now, Gran Negro was back to being what he had always been, a magnificent breeding bull. The news spread quickly through the town. Many came to see the miracle, as some called it, for themselves. Among them were several important cattle ranchers from the region, who observed the animal with expert eyes and murmured among themselves in admiration. One of them, Don Gustavo Mendoza, the largest cattle breeder in the province, approached Don Elias after examining the bull. "This animal is exceptional," Don Elias said sincerely. "It has superior genetics. I'd be interested in using it as a stud bull for my cows. I'd pay well for each service." Don Elias could hardly believe what he was hearing. Other ranchers approached him with similar offers. Suddenly, the animal that everyone had ridiculed him for was becoming a potential source of income, like he had never dreamed of. When Pedro found out what was happening, his face contorted with rage. He went to Don Elias's house, bursting in like a storm. "You tricked me, you old fox," he shouted, pointing his finger at him. "You knew the bull would recover. You bought him from me just to make a profit behind my back." Don Elias looked at him calmly, without a trace of fear or guilt in his gaze. "I didn't know anything, boss. I only had faith and patience. Two things you lack. You set the price yourself and sold me the animal because you thought it was worthless. It was a fair deal." "I'm offering you double what you paid," said Pedro, suddenly changing his strategy. "The animal must return to my ranch, where it belongs." Don Elias shook his head gently. "It's not for sale, boss. This animal is now part of my family." The news of Don Elias's rejection of Pedro's offer spread quickly. People commented in amazement at how the humble worker had had the courage to refuse the powerful landowner. Some criticized him for being proud, but many more secretly admired him. The following months transformed the lives of Don Elias and his family. El Gran Negro became the most sought-after stud bull in the region. Cattle ranchers from neighboring provinces came to see him and paid considerable sums to have their cows covered by him. The resulting offspring were exceptional, and soon the name of Don Elias and his bull was known throughout the country. With the income, Don Elias was able to buy more land, improve his house, and provide an education for his grandchildren. But what he enjoyed most was sitting each afternoon by the corral, where the great black horse rested, and contemplating him in silence, grateful. One day, almost 2 years after that purchase that everyone considered madness, Don Pedro appeared at their door again. But this time, he came alone, without his usual arrogance. "Can I talk to you, Elias?" he asked, with a humility that surprised the old man. She invited him in, and Doña Carmen served them coffee. Pedro stared at the cup in his hands, unable to begin. "Things haven't been going well on the farm," he finally said. "Too many bad decisions, wrong investments. I'm about to lose everything." Don Elias watched him in silence, feeling a strange mixture of compassion and divine justice. "I've come to ask for your help," Pedro continued, his voice breaking. "I need a loan to save my father's farm. I know you have money now, thanks to that animal I despised." Silence filled the small room. Doña Carmen looked at her husband, knowing that there was no room for resentment in his heart, but fearing that his kindness would be taken advantage of again. "Let's go see Negro," said Don Elias, getting up. The two men walked to the corral, where the magnificent bull rested in the shade. The animal watched them approach, recognizing them both. When Pedro tried to get closer, the bull snorted menacingly, perhaps remembering past mistreatment. "He doesn't forget," Don Elias remarked. "Animals have better memories than we think." Pedro lowered his gaze, ashamed. "I haven't forgotten either," Don Pedro continued. "I haven't forgotten how he mocked me, how he thought I was a fool for believing in the animal's recovery. But I also remember his father, who was a good man and a good employer. Out of respect for his memory, I'm going to help him." Peter's eyes filled with tears, tears of shame, of gratitude, of belated repentance. "But on one condition," added Don Elias, "that he learn from this animal, that he understand that sometimes what seems lost only needs time and care to become great again, that he understand that the value of things and of people is not measured by their immediate usefulness." Pedro nodded silently, looking at the magnificent black bull that he had almost sent to the slaughterhouse, and that was now the salvation of his family farm. Months later, the La Esperanza Ranch was thriving once again. Pedro had learned his lesson. He treated his workers with respect, cared for his animals diligently, and listened to the advice of Don Elias, whom he now considered not just an employee, but a mentor. The great black one lived for many more years, leaving offspring that improved the livestock of the entire region. And when his time finally came, he was buried with honors atop a hill, where Don Elias, now an old man, would sometimes go to sit and contemplate the lands that fate, or perhaps God, had placed under his care, thanks to an animal that everyone had given up for lost. Never forget this. What the world despises, God can use to lift up those who trust in Him. Don't measure the value of something by what others tell you it's worth, but by the faith and care you're willing to invest in it. Sometimes our greatest blessings come disguised as burdens no one else wants to carry. If this story reminded you that patience and kindness always pay off, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Storybox Sage for more soul-nourishing stories. And if you know someone going through a tough time, share this story to remind them that, like the great black man, sometimes all we need is time and faith to get back on our feet.